All right, picking up from where I left off, we have the British Empire now. So, here's what we got. And again, very similar. You'll see there's a few pieces I have painted that don't quite match. It was kind of came down to what I could figure out worked best at the time. But let's start with the basics. We got our infantry, artillery, transport subs, cruisers, dreadnoughts, fighters, all out of box. You can use the out of box tanks because they are the appropriate tanks. I painted a few just to get some more in more detail, but I'll backtrack to that in a moment. But let's start with the infantry. So Britain in this game, Britain and Germany need a lot of infantry. I showed you how to add extra infantry from your if you're trying to get to match colors and you're not wanting to paint. Pull some German infantry from your copy of Classic, and they match quite Accidentally Classic, and they match quite well. So likewise, similar to that, I found this. So these celery green infantry from I think they're from early versions or some versions of the revised edition of Axis and Allies. This one, yeah, this copy. I'm not gonna pull it up because all my games are stacked there. But yeah, so some versions of that version of the game have these celery green infantry, and every once in a while HBG gets some of these in. If you have these, you can totally use these to pad your British forces. Just kind of look at a little comparison on the map. They don't match exactly, they're slightly off in color, but there's no mistaking them for anybody else, pretty much. So I feel like though they work quite nicely or close enough. So we'll see. But anyway, okay. So yeah, anyway, going on from there. So yeah, that's to pad my British infantry. I throw some of those guys in there, and I use those guys too. When Axis and Allies 1914 is reissued, I will be grabbing a copy anyway and probably integrating more proper British units into there because always like to have them with the bayonets when you can. These are great. Moving on, obviously trucks, and I have mostly the Shapeways trucks, and I have a couple of the Liberty trucks from historical board gaming. But when I painted these, these were done with the Rust-Oleum paint, and when I painted these, for whatever reason, I don't know if I used too much paint, I don't know if there was humidity issues or something, but the paint crazed and cracked on a bunch of them for some reason, so I only have a couple of them with this mold. And some of my cavalry did that too, but yeah, I just painted some historical board gaming cavalry. Yeah, so got them there. Same basic stuff. And again, this doesn't match 100%. It's actually too bright. It's definitely, by comparison, too bright. But again, on the map, it's not super bad. There's not mistaking, you can't mistake it really for anything else in comparison to what is going to be around it. So this was my solution at the time to try and match this color, which I have found very difficult. Most of the paints that I use are Tamiya brand paints, model paints, but there's not anything like this from Tamiya that's a spray paint to use. What I have been found out is that a friend of mine, he paints his pieces, and he found that there's a brand, I'm blanking out what the brand is. I think it's like Modeler's Paint or Friend or something or another, but the paint is called Necrotic Flesh. And I haven't done it myself just yet, but it looks exactly like this and seems flatter, whereas this Rust-Oleum paint is definitely a little bright side. I think this is the green apple. Again, I'll do a paint video, an updated paint video at some point in the future too. But I think this is the Rust-Oleum green apple paint. And as you can see, like I said, it was after a certain point, it was a matter of trying to find something that matched close enough, These are the historical board gaming bombers. I can't remember what the name of all these bombers are, but the British bomber is this. So that's what I used. And they're 3D printed, so some bombers occasionally you can kind of see it's a little bit bent, and that's from the 3D printing process and stuff, but for the most part, most of them are like, yeah, like this one's fine. very minimal. And then yeah, here's the do a comparison. Yeah, here's the out-of-box tank that you get from 1914, and every nation is like that. And here's the British, the HBG Mark IV. Maybe it's Mark V, but yeah. So it's bigger. You get a lot more detail. It's cool. Not entirely necessary, but it just was something fun to do at the time. And then here are the choices for my British Task Force markers were these. And HBG doesn't have a Task Force marker ring remotely in this color, so I went through the painful task of painting these, which is annoying because you can't get any paint on the inside, because if you get paint on the inside, you won't be able to get a roundel in there because it builds up just enough that it gets way too tight. And then we, of course, have 30 or so roundels for Britain. I might actually have 40 in here. I'm not entirely sure. But you will, as Britain and Germany will be the ones that will do the most expanding on the axis, on the Kings and Kaisers map. They will expand the most overall. So you do not want to have, you want to have enough British roundels. And of course we have the British hero unit, which is Snoopy. This was just kind of my way of integrating my sense of humor into the game, because I thought, okay, well, if we put the Red Baron, he's a one-time special unit that Germany can buy. Who can the Allies build to offset him? And it became abundantly clear to me that after I saw this red Monopoly piece on Historical Board Gaming site, it's Snoopy's doghouse. So, and it even has like a little mount for a magnet in there. That's a 3mm by 1mm magnet. And so that is Snoopy, the hero unit of the Allied powers that Britain can buy. Now, to kind of match the Red Baron marker here, this is just an extra kamikaze flight stand marker I had, and I just put it upside down just to kind of give that red little element, right? So that's pretty cool, and he stands out quite a bit. Anyway, so there you go. So that's the British Empire, which is, it's the Britain Empire, not UK, because it is all of the British Empire you are playing with as one power, which is pretty cool. There's no Commonwealth, there's no Anzac, there's no Canada. It's all one power, and it's actually quite a lot of fun to play as Britain in this game, but very challenging at times too. So that's always a plus. And kind of back into France, I think I skipped the amount of roundels. I think I just have 20 French roundels. You know, I'd say at minimum, just to make sure you absolutely have more than enough, I would say 20 roundels per, give or take. Just, you know, too much is better than not enough, you know. Now we go on to Japan, which is probably the most interesting because, or one of the most interesting units here, or not units, sorry, powers, because, as you know, there is no Japan in out-of-box 1914. So Japan was a lot of work, also not a lot of work. Historical Board Gaming was a big help with this. So some of this is painted because I wanted to get the molds right, and some of it was close enough, and so I just bought them from Historical Board Gaming or whatever. But there's definitely a few ways to do this. So Japan, as Lion in the Trenches did it, Japan is yellow, and I painted some Japanese pieces in the same school bus yellow that he went with, which was Tamiya camel yellow, I think is what it's called. Try to get this guy out of here. So, but at the same time, I, you know, had some issues, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So this is a Historical Board Gaming infantry, a Japanese infantry, and he's got a bayonet, and I thought it was cool. So I got a bunch of these, and I've painted a bunch of these. These are brittle as heck. Very brittle. Like, if I drop this on the ground and I've handed it to friends and they drop it by accident, that bayonet very likely will just shoot off. And I think this is one I've actually glued back to try and fix. These things are super brittle, and sometimes the feet even snap off if you drop it. These things are super brittle, and I honestly, like, I did it and I use these, but I'm very careful with them. I would not recommend these. If this is what you're looking for, a game piece, just as a simple game piece, not a model piece that you have to put in like a foam tray or something, I would not recommend these. For simple basic game pieces, I would just instead go with the basic plastic route of Historical Board Gaming's gold and yellow pieces. Okay, so this is their golden yellow. They have golden yellow units available, and I like that color this color quite a bit. It doesn't quite match with the school bus yellow, but again, when it's on the board, you get the gist of what it is, pretty much. This is what I did. It's not what you have to do. Not saying it's what you have to do, but if you don't want to paint and you just want to get into the action, I would just try and go with gold and yellow Historical Board Gaming pieces. Here's some out-of-box extra artillery I painted. Side note, painting the out-of-box units, whatever the pieces are made out of, it's a waxier material than like normal 1914 pieces. So I actually had some like chipping issues when I would take it off my painter's tape, and I'd have to do a few touch-ups on artillery and some transports. So I painted these because I wanted to, but you know, anyway, not as much of a challenge as like standard accentualized pieces to paint them. For some reason, they kind of have a more waxy texture to it. And then this is a Historical Board Gaming artillery that is golden yellow. So you don't want to paint, you get one of these. You know, I know it's a World War II piece, but it's simple enough. It blends in enough. It's an artillery. Okay. Now trucks. This is also nice. You don't have to paint these trucks. Historical Board Gaming trucks, and again, I know these are World War II trucks with four wheels in the back, but hey, a truck is a truck, and I didn't care about the specificness of the mold that much, and I like these a lot because again, you don't have to paint them. So just get a few of those. Now here's a little interesting thing here. So these are again Risk Cavalry, and there's a few variations of the Risk Cavalry in yellow. And this is the more flat, dull yellow, which matches better with this golden yellow here. It's not exact, but it looks better, I would say. I think it looks better. Here, see if I can focus on this a little bit. I would say this looks a little better to me. Let me just show a comparison. For my Spain stuff that I have, I also have them in yellow, but it's more of a brighter. Let's see if I can focus on this issue. It's a little brighter looking, and it's a little almost too bright by comparison when it's like on the map and stuff. So you can see like the difference between these two. So I much prefer this dull yellow in comparison to this more bright yellow. In comparison, just it blends in a little better. I feel like this blends in better than this does, in my opinion, like just kind of comparison. I know it's really subtle, and I know for some reason, at least to me, it doesn't look like I'm having a lot of detail issue, but anyway, or not a lot of detail is totally coming through on through the viewfinder on my phone, but I like this more than this. So if you want to poach from like online YouTube posts, you're making like get away from the lights a little bit. You can kind of see the difference there. I'll just put it on the board. See? Subtle, but there is a difference there in how the piece looks, right? So I would say, yeah, I think that comes across pretty clear right there. This dull yellow matches better than this harsher yellow. So if you care and you want to try and get stuff matching, I use those for Spain, but these dull yellow ones for Japan. Okay, transports. Transports I did a combination of. Out of box 1914, these were extra US transports that I painted, that I got from Historical Board Gaming. But I also just used the standard World War II transports, and I painted some of those too. And I would honestly just do that. It looks generic enough that it is just a transport's, you know, a transport is a transport. Why am I getting focus issues? Probably because I'm being mobile and it's not standing. All right, there we go. So yeah, transport is a transport, you know, with the smokestacks, it's pretty clear, right? Now for submarines, to try and match with the out of box 1914 size of the subs, Historical Board Gaming has yellow subs, but they're too big, I think, from what I can tell. They look like they're too big. So I tracked down some, or not tracked down, but I bought some accidentalized 1941 subs, some extra subs, and I painted those. So these are the subs I painted, 1941 submarines, Japanese submarines. Although I think you can use the German one to get German ones to paint too, because I think they're the same mold if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, so that's that. And then cruisers and dreadnoughts, I went with these. These again are World War II molds, but they overall kind of matched close enough. Close enough. So this is a Yamato battleship. I forget what cruiser it is, but if you could look at this cruiser, there's a couple different cruiser options. This is the cruiser I went with from Historical Board Gaming. And I just went with this because it just looked close enough. I know it's not, I know this is inaccurate, but again, it was just a matter of saving time and not wanting to paint every single piece. And, you know, kind of matching enough. It's about the right size. Oh, there's a name on top. Okay, it's cool. So I totally forgot. HBG likes to put names on the bottom of them. So this is the Fuso. Fuso? Let's say Fuso cruiser that Historical Board Gaming has. And then in terms of fighters, once again, I took those, the same German biplanes, because usually HBG has these in stock. These are the ones that stay in stock. And painted these. So I painted 10 of these. That should be more than enough. I think there's 10 of those, yeah. And then for the bomber, there's not a Japanese bomber mold they have, but since the British supported Japan pretty much, Japan was mostly in cahoots with Britain in terms of, Britain gave them the go-ahead in the Pacific. So this is a British bomber. If you want bombers for Japan, just go with a British mold. That's what I did. Now we get to the tanks, which is fun. So you could probably, since we don't have armored cars as a piece, you could probably just use armored cars that HBG has in gold and yellow if you don't want to paint. But if you wanted to paint, it didn't make any sense to me that they would have like Mark IVs or whatever. So I got the Whippet tanks, and my reasoning was just that, like, if Japan was supplied with a tank by Britain, it would probably be these, because it would probably be easier to transport these or something or another. So yeah, the Whippet tanks for Japan, that's what I did. And kind of cool. I didn't paint any of these for Britain. Maybe I will one day, but yeah, that's what I did. So there you go. And then of course we have this roundel. We use this roundel for Japan, and we like it a lot. It's really cool. And then we use the classic Rising Sun roundel. I use this for my task force marker for Japan, and that's a golden yellow or gold yellow, whatever, ring and stuff. And it's kind of cool. It's cool to use this as your task force marker, because that's like their navy, right? And then that's their national flag. So it actually looks pretty cool when it's on the board, if you need it as Japan. Usually you don't, but hey, I'm a sucker for visual flair, right? Okay. Moving on. Ottomans. Okay, now this should be pretty quick. I did paint a few things. I painted some trucks. Probably won't have to paint any more, but I painted some trucks. I used the Rust-Oleum Lagoon. Used these Risk Cavalry. And painted these bombers. These are German bombers, so they don't have, HBG doesn't have any Ottoman German pieces, but Ottoman bomber pieces, but I just painted, it felt like if they were going to get supplied bombers, it would probably be from the Germans, so I painted some Germans. Now, for their tanks, Ottoman Empire did not have any tanks in the war, but realistically, if they were going to have tanks, they would probably just be captured Mark IVs. So I'm keeping the out-of-box tanks, and I also painted a few, for funsies, I painted a few British Mark IV tanks as well from HBG. So yeah, that is my Ottomans. And then got enough roundels. 20, I think it's 20 roundels. And then these are what I use for task force markers. There's not really a lot of options. So this is the Dervish state, which is pro-Ottoman, and we have that on the map over here. But I felt like, hey, it's kind of like the same aesthetic, same kind of coloration. So that's close enough. And then I forget what this is. It's like a United Arab Emirates. I know that's wrong. But it's somewhere in this part of the world. And it was actually an pro-Allied, but I felt like it was just aesthetically like close enough. It's their moon flag. It works, just for the sake of giving them another one. And then this is an Ottoman Air Force roundel, and as you can see, it's square, so it doesn't fit in those rings, but it's distinct enough where you could tell what it is and stuff. So there we go. Backing up to France real super quick, I just realized, I don't think I mentioned this in the portion of the French video. You can use historical board gaming cavalry. I decided to use French ones just because it's very French. So I kind of felt like just having Risk cavalry for France instead of the blue historical board gaming ones, just to kind of give them a little more of a visual flair look to them. Moving on real quick, I can knock out Italy real fast. Okay, again, pretty much everything out of box except Japanese cavalry from historical board gaming in the pumpkin orange. It matches quite well. There's only one in their starting setup so far in our games, so you're not going to need a lot. But again, I always get 10 minimum. I would say just to play it safe. But you could probably also just get away with 5 because I don't think Italy is going to be buying much cavalry. And then we got these bombers of theirs, and as you can see, this one kind of crazed on me. Didn't feel like really touching it up, but you can kind of see some crazing marks on it. So it's not the neatest, but hey, it still works. After a certain point, you have to stop being a perfectionist, So, fortunately, most of these crazed on me, but whatever. And then the Italian tanks. Dang, these focus issues is killing me. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I don't get it. So, the Italian tanks are these mammoth-looking boxes. I forget what they're called. They're Fiat 2000s or something like that. I originally painted like a Shapeways pieces, and then historical board gaming made some later. So there's a few of mine with less detail, and these ones have more detail. But this was used again with Rust-Oleum. I think it's like a cinnamon or something. And then we have an out-of-box Italy roundel from 1940, as this was the Air Force roundel they used at the time. So that is the task force marker for them. That brings us to the United States. The very different United States from what we're usually used to. It is a dark green. We got, standard infantry, standard artillery, standard transport, standard subs, cruisers, dreadnoughts, fighters. All those are the same. We of course have some Liberty trucks and other the Shapeways trucks that I painted. And I did paint some cavalry for them. This paint, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. This is a Tamiya NATO green, and it matches like pretty exact. Like that's pretty dang close. I'm really happy with this paint. So yeah, NATO green Tamiya. And then of course painted some American bombers. And I did a few different early tank options. The U.S. of course used French tanks, the Renaults, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. And then they also had a few other prototype designs. That HBG had the steam wheel tank, very funny looking little guy. And then the skeleton tank, and this tank is so bizarre. This is so cool. I love this tank. Some company made one of these, and I think it's still on display in Minnesota somewhere. Very cool, weird design for a tank. I love it. I love the weirdness of 1914 World War I tanks. And then of course we have their task force marker. I had to paint this one. HBG does not have a task force marker in that color. and then about 20 US roundels, but probably might need 10. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, so there you go. That's US. And we have one more left. Let's see if I can get through it quickly. We have the Soviets. And they only come into play if the armistice is accepted in the Russian front, but there's actually two different colors of HBG pieces. It's like light red and red, but they're both close enough to me, I think, that that they work pretty well. So like, let's see, that they're almost indistinguishable from each other. It's like really subtle. So I think this is light red and this is red. And I mean, it's very subtle. I'm not sure if it's really picking through, but it's subtle enough that, I mean, if you're looking at it on a table, it's not going to be that much of an issue. You know, so kind of using a little bit of column A and column B. I used, I think some of these are more modern or World War II pieces that HBG carries, but I used these artillery. I used these trucks. For some reason, there's a slight hue difference in some of them because I bought them at different times. But these standard HBG trucks, again, Risk cavalry, HBG transports, HBG subs. These cruisers, I know they have a few different cruiser options. These ones, the what is this? Kirov, Kirov. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. And then we got their old battleships. Soviets probably aren't going to be building much battleships or much of a navy, but they can. And then again, just these fighters, just because these biplanes are what they'll pretty much always have in stock at HBG. So I just painted like 10 of these. And then the same Russian bomber, this big mammoth, painted red, which is really cool. And then last but not least, they're tanks. And unfortunately, I painted these HBG tanks. I also painted these for the Russian Empire. I cannot recommend these because, as you can see, that gun just breaks off from rattling around in my storage box. So I'm going to be replacing these, and I'm probably not painting them. They didn't have any tanks in the Russian Civil War. They might have used a few Mark IVs or Mark Vs that were captured and repurposed them. But I think I'm just going to go with some HBG armored car pieces in the same color scheme. So they'll look kind of like that, and they'll look funky enough where I think it'll just work. So that's just my opinion. If they come into play, there's a few guys in here for Finland, because Finland becomes a neutral if they come into power. And we have a couple task force markers for them with red rings. And from HBG again, and we go with these roundels for them. We don't use their Russian flag. We just like the Red Army Russian sickle and hammer. You can go with the more accurate one, but the accurate one, it's just it's like a sliver in the corner and the rest is red. It's just not very interesting to look at. This is way more fun to look at. So we go with this one. And then right here is again, I'm experimenting with a Green Army's idea, so I just keep these guys in my box until we figure that out. Again, that'll be in an expansion. Green Army roundels and infantry, and we'll use the green chips for these guys. We'll use these green chips to go ahead and use with them. But anyway, I just keep them in there. So that's a little sneak peek for the future, so to speak. That's about it. Oh yeah, China. Man, I'm running low on time. All right, China. Real quick, knock out China. Focus. Okay, out of box 1940 infantry for the Republic of China. Artillery. We use these celery. I use these celery green ones, and then the standard like olive drab cavalry. So they don't quite match enough, but they're close enough. For the Republic of China or Empire of China, we use these purple infantry. We like them to be purple. These HBG artillery, and then again HBG cavalry. But I paint these. I had to paint these. There aren't any purple cavalry unfortunately. And then we have respective task force markers for each side. Backing up. So if China is united, they use this roundel. If China is not united and there's civil wars going on, the Empire of China uses this. You can find this at Combat Miniatures. The Republic of China right now, we have them use this, and it's kind of stems from, this is what Cobra uses for that faction. This is actually the Qing Empire roundel. It's not historically accurate, but just as like a color contrast and to like not confuse people with like, because technically that is the KMT. Not to confuse people, but like, why aren't they an allied power? Well, they're not yet, but the Allies most definitely favor the Empire of China with Japan and Britain. So this is pro-allied, this is pro-central power. So you can use this one if you want, or you can use some variation of a KMT roundel, but we don't do that. We don't do that. We like the aesthetic of this roundel with this yellow dragon and stuff. I know it. Some people might say it doesn't make any sense, but like aesthetically and gameplay wise, it works. It works the best, we find. So, and again, it's, you know, if you don't want to use that, it's not printed on the map. It's printed on one of our cards, but it's not printed on the map if you don't want to use that. So, but I do encourage it because it does ultimately look aesthetically the best with the pieces and the side of the board and stuff. So that's what we do, and probably going to run out of time on my phone, but we'll see. Anyway, so that is the other chunk of the components. So stay tuned. I'm gonna be setting up a game soon, and we're gonna get another YouTube war going real soon. Probably at the end of this week we'll be getting going with one. So stay tuned, and hopefully I can roll the dice better, but we'll see. So catch you later.